The next two episodes of the HBO Max series Tokyo Vice is now arriving. Admittedly, the first three were a bit slower than I expected, but the show began to hook me. So how are these next two episodes? Alright, this is going to have some minor spoilers for the first three episodes, but I'm going to stay away from any spoilers for the current two. When episode 3 concluded, we watched Jake being picked up from the batting cages by the Yakuza. And when I say picked up, I never got the sense that he had any sort of say in the matter. Episode 4 picks up right where the episode 3 leaves off, and the interaction that takes place, I think, is quietly intense. Jake has a discussion with someone in the Chiara Kai family, and I got serious Godfather vibes, like I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse sort of vibes. So if you were on the fence though about watching the show after watching the first 3 episodes, maybe it wasn't picking up enough, or maybe just the story was still a little too vague, whatever that reason, these current 2 episodes are incredibly exciting, and they pick up the pace in just about every way. The investigation into the loan sharks and the suicides that Jake is conducting is really now gathering momentum, and I love how we now get to see more interaction between Jake and Emi as they work together. I got a bunch of chuckles at some of the reactions either she or he had while the other was interviewing someone. They were each typically caught off guard, and the looks of disbelief or maybe even consternation just made me chuckle. More of Sam's story is also delved into in these episodes, which gives her a ton of backstory and insight into her motivations. Now, we saw that she'd been saving to start her own club, but now complications arise that make for some good tension within the story. And along that note, we also get more insight into Jake's family life and why he typically is avoiding phone calls from his family. And what we get is fairly brief, but it does help to flesh out a bit more of his character. Ansel Elgort feels genuine in his timid cockiness, and that's an oxymoron, I know, but he's self-assured in certain aspects, but also awkward and uncertain in others. Even though he's been in Japan for a while and he can speak the language, he's still an outsider, and that is evident in so many of his interactions. Ken Watanabe's Katagiri isn't in these too prominently this time, but he and Jake are really establishing a great working relationship that is looking to be mutually beneficial. Katagiri wants to rely on Jake to investigate and bring to light aspects of crimes and behaviors that he can't, even though he's a police officer, and Jake relies on Katagiri to provide information that fuels his news stories with exclusive information and details, just as long as he doesn't write about them, which is the ongoing mantra between them. I'm loving the dive into Sato's story also. While he's a gangster, he's also very sympathetic. We can see something in his eyes. Now, maybe he's just not fully sold on the Yakuza life, or maybe he's ambitious but not willing to do what it takes to rise in the ranks. We get the sense that he's searching and longing for something quieter or maybe more satisfying, but he has no means of changing his path without causing himself a ton of trouble. He's also not as fierce or bloodthirsty as he initially seemed, but he still isn't to be messed with when it counts. The scenarios that this show is setting up are gaining momentum, but also anxiety. There's this sort of powder keg brewing from multiple angles, and I'm very curious at where the spark is going to come from first, and then what kind of carnage and chaos it's going to create. There are some sequences of action that they're not overly flashy, but they still become very tense and very exciting. The aesthetics are still fairly dark and gritty, and the production likes to put most of the action at night, which then casts these ominous shadows. It also, though, allows for the neon lights to cast harsh beams of light on the characters, washing them in either deep reds or sometimes bright blues. Now, I've seen some comments online that have mentioned how this doesn't really feel like it's taking place in the late 90s, but the dress, the cars, and even the music very much highlight the end of the 20th century. There's a conversation between Jake and Sato that revolves around a certain song, and then they have this very brief discussion on bands. Now, I laughed at how this plays out because it's not what you'd expect from a Yakuza enforcer. I picture them insanely tough and jaded, but Sato's choice of music in this one scene screams the absolute opposite. There's definitely more mystery that's being built out within the show. The story is ramping up each arc and creating opportunities for the characters to progress in each of their goals. Now, based on the actions that surround both Sato and Jake, and then how certain avenues could eventually connect, I think a sort of showdown or maybe fateful choice is approaching rather quickly for them. So overall, even though we're only in the middle of the story, episodes 4 and 5 of Tokyo Vice have really picked up the momentum by diving more into the narrative elements and pulling us deeper into the mystery that Jake is examining. The relationships between Jake, Sato, Katagiri, Emi, and Sam are becoming more and more intertwined and intriguing, and they continue to build out complexities that are endearing and then compelling. While I wasn't totally sure if I was on board after the first 3 episodes, I'm now fully invested, and I can't wait to see what happens next for our characters. The drama continues to grow, and I'm loving the aesthetics of the production. From the music and the costumes to the lighting and settings, just all of it builds out a world that is formidable but also curious. There's a lot of sex, some nudity, a bunch of profanity, and some very brutal violence. I give episodes 4 and 5 of Tokyo Vice 4.5 out of 5 couches. So have you been watching this series? Who's your favorite character so far? Now, I think Sato is mine just because there's so much that we still have to discover about him. But let me know who yours is in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.